Welcome everyone to the second round of the Drought Resilience in Action webinar series. We will be sharing today valuable insights on drought resilience initiatives across Western Australia, particularly because of the Drought Hub project, which has been supporting us in order to uplift climate resilient practices in our farming systems and in the whole region. Today, we're really excited to hear from two really well accomplished researchers that are Richard George and Nik Callow, who are present today, who will share their expertise on improving access to adequate uh, quality of water in farming. And they have different perspectives, which is interesting. And I want to thank you both for being present today, give us your insights and sharing with us, and of course, to all of you to be present in this magnificent event. To kickstart, I would like to know a little bit about yourself. So if you can share, just turn on the mic and just introduce yourself, give a little bit, maybe your name, what do you do, and what do you think you will gain from this session today? And no pressure if you cannot talk. We understand that it's a busy time. Many people can just barely turn in. So what about if we start with you? Tara, if you can give us a couple of words, please, that would be fantastic.
That's me. Sorry, it's my wife's name. I'm Josh. I actually live and work in South Australia, the Prime Minister's Department over here. But I'm working with State Water Delivery Corporation here to develop an extension program, hopefully. So, we're looking at a lot of the same stuff and just curious to, see some of your stuff and see the feedback from growers and stuff. What's going on? That's all. Just an observer, really, but a ex-farmer as well. So, yeah.
Thank you very much, Josh. Yeah, it's really good to have you here as well. I reckon there is a lot of value to have today. And maybe Glenis, I don't know if you may be able to give us a couple of words as well.
Hi, yes, Glenys Batchelor. I'm the Executive Officer from Merredin and Districts Farm Improvement Group, and we are one of the collaborators with FACey in both the Drought Hub and also Water Smart dams, and also very interested in the Water Smart farming programs. So I'm here to listen and learn anything else and also support the team.
Thanks, Glenis. It's really great to have you here as well. And we know that you participated also in the projects that are present here. So that's fantastic. Ravi, do you want to give us a couple of words as well? Ravi, you're mute.
Yep, sure. So thanks everyone. Myself, Ravi, working for FACey. I'm colleague of Tina and Franco, and I'm interested in desalinations as our grower groups are facing salinity problems. And I had a exchange couple of words or little bit with Richard before. So I think if I can get something from this webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Ravi. Now I had to ask Chloe. Chloe, if you can present yourself, just with a couple of words. Chloe, that's okay if you're not available to talk. That's perfectly fine. But just keeping you engaging with the whole event, that will be fantastic. Uh, yeah, we have Y Hollings. If you can actually just take the chance just to give us a name and present yourself, that would be fantastic. Well, I reckon that if it's the case, we can start with what will be the presentation. Thank you very much for sharing a little bit about yourself. I would like to encourage any question that you would like to formulate, just can put in the chat or just stating for the Q&A that is going to be at the end of both presentations. And heading towards the first one, we will have Richard George, that is a land and water scientist dedicated to protect Australian agriculture and natural resources. Has been collaborating with many institutions, including national agencies and, of course, universities and research teams to bring innovative solutions in Western Australia. Currently, he's leading the Water Smart Farm projects, which is looking into some interesting things about on-farm desalinization plants. And of course, he's also working in this new technology of reverse osmosis systems with the National Water Grid Authority. Please, Richard, your stage.
Thank you very much. I guess the first thing is just to make sure that you can see the presentation.
It's all good.
All good? Yep. Thank you. First slide's up?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. All right, look, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Water Smart Farms project, and you'll see on the picture there it's a collaboration between quite a few groups, and I guess that reflects the fact that water was and is a big issue for dryland agriculture and all the industries and allied industries that work in our 17 million hectare wheat belt. That dam was dry, and what you see in that dam is actually the rejected water from our RO plant, which is sitting in that yellow container just to the side. So I've just moved to slide 2 just to make sure that I'm seeing what you're seeing. So Water Smart Farms is a partnership that began in February 2021 off the back of 2 or 3 dry seasons. And it had an objective of developing multiple pieces, which Nik will talk about some of the other elements. So the first part that I'm going to focus on today is the groundwater and desalination work. Nik will talk through the role of dams and making surface water work again, which was its short title. And we've moved on and developed some other projects, which I won't cover today. Let's get cracking. So we've talked about the reasons why water was deficient. I think most of us get the logic of more dry seasons, increase in requirements around technology about wanting more water and water of a much better quality. And in Western Australia, we have this issue of having some farms on the comprehensive water supply scheme, but a large number of farms self-supply, and Corrige and Facey Group sit in that threshold. In the top right-hand box there, you'll see a lot of experimental work that's been going, and I've just collated all the sites where we're looking at alternate water supply options. Today, as I said, I'm just going to focus on using excess water in the landscape that's brackish to saline, and I'm going to look at the use of RO technology. So I've moved on a screen, and I hope you're still with me.
Yep.
Good, thank you. So one of the unique things we've got about Western Australia is we have, since clearing, developed a massive groundwater system across the wheat belt. It's brackish to saline. It's resulted in about 1 million hectares of saltland development, 1.7, depending on how you define that. And what we do as an organisation is track the growth and the development of salinity. But as a byproduct of that, we've also tracked the increase in the amount of groundwater that is in the wheat belt, that it's in that brackish to saline class. All those dots on the image are where we currently monitor. And if you can see the little inset on the left-hand box, it describes the amount of which the groundwater systems are filling. This is between Harrismith and Toolman, which is in the Facey area. And you'll see that the groundwater levels are still rising across the 30 years at around about 10 to 15 centimetres a year. So what does that mean? It means that we've got a large and growing groundwater resource. What does that mean? If we can find it of a reasonable quality, then we've got a water supply solution. And if we find it of a quality that's not adequate, then with technology, we can treat that and make it into a water size solution. So the first thing I'd state about this conversation about the dual practices that we're going to talk about, which is finding water that is fit for purpose, or finding water and treating water that's fit for purpose, there's a large exploration piece. And so one of the first objectives of this project was to look through all the exploration data that we had across the wheat belt and all the tools that we had to locate and find water. So in the partnership that I talked about earlier, we partnered up with the Curtin University Geophysics Group, and we also partnered with our mining and exploration team, which was in the Department of Mines. And they already have data sets across the wheat belt, and the top right-hand one is geology, and the bottom right-hand one is soils and soils variability. So we've packaged that in an app, which you can see on the left, and that's the beginning of a pathway to find water. And whether the water's in the top 20 or 30 metres, or whether it's down the next 100 metres, that data set gives us guidance. It can't be used solo, but it gives us guidance. So what we did is develop a process to find about 20 pilot sites where we would go looking for water in locations that were geologically interesting. And we, as I said, teamed up with Curtin to do ground surveys. So those guys at the top of that picture have got ground surveying equipment. And in this particular site, just near Corrigan, we located some interesting geology, which I won't go into the specifics, but what you can see on that little takeaway inset diagram up to the top is an area of a few hundred square metres, or a few thousand square metres, I should say, where that geology that's in the inset was defined in detail. And we then placed 2 deep drill holes to locate water in fractures in the top 100 metres. So again, our first goal for this project is to find water that doesn't need treatment. And we'll get on to the conversation about what happens if you do need treatment. So a quick summary of the work that we've been doing to look at how that project was successful. And so we've drilled holes across the lowest rainfall part of the wheat belt, east of Merredin, which is where Glennis's group comes from, through the Facey area out towards the high rainfall zone. And of those holes, 17 drilled from 70 to 100 metres into the fractured bedrock. We were successful in 10 of them. And of 5 of them, we got very high initial yields. And in all of those, they were livestock quality, but not all of those were suitable for a higher quality use. For example, for the use of for lambs for low salinity applications. And in the particular picture there, and it might turn into a movie in a sec, we were pumping from a fracture at about 80 to 90 metres, airlifting about 5 litres per second, which is 300 or 400 tonne of water a day, at about 4,500 milligrams per litre, which is good sheep water, but obviously not something that you would irrigate with, and this is not a project where we even contemplated irrigation. So I can see a movie playing. If you can, that's good. So that's just a snapshot of the role of exploration tools to find groundwater that is fit for purpose, and that was the purpose of the project. And we were really surprised. I was pleasantly surprised with the results, and I'm glad for the success rates. And now we obviously have to look at implementing that across the 17 million hectares in a lot more sites. But not in every site is the water of a suitable quality, and that's why we're going to dive into a little conversation about reverse osmosis salination. And what we did first is look at the early adopters, of which there are about 50 sites across the ag zone. And we've teamed up with Murdoch University and Water Corporation to do this piece of work. And we've done an inventory analysis of a large number of those units. And we're doing some reasonably detailed life cycle cost and metrics around about 11 of those, which are spread across those icons across the greater wheat belt. The 2 guys that are shown in the images here are farmers that have adopted reasonably sized RO systems, and I can share that their case studies. The one at the top is providing water for a feedlot. The one at the bottom is providing water for his spray technology. And these are between 40 and 60,000 litres a day supplies. And as I said, they've got 2 very specific purposes for using that water for value add, industry value add, plus increased efficiency of spray technology. So move on to what I think is an external outcome, which we were really keen to try and explore. At the site where this particular farmer has switched off all their water corporation or their pipe water and is producing 60,000 litres a day of reverse osmosis pure water and rejecting 60,000 litres a day of rejected water, a byproduct of that was the reclamation of 20 hectares of saltland. And that's the image on the left. And the picture behind my vehicle is the saline area that was in that paddock and is now growing lupins, which is a very sensitive crop. So to actually put this into practice, we teamed up with 3 towns to put in 3 different scales of RO reverse osmosis system, and also a school, which I'll show next. So these statistics that you're looking at while I talk are the amounts of water provided, the amounts of salt in the groundwater at these sites, and the sites are now heading for their first summer in some cases and second summer in another. And they're slightly different in the way that they've actually been implemented. So the numbers are approximate, but in general, the project now will be to do the life cycle costs of these RO plants, which is a typical one in the top left. And I'll take you now to a second generation adoption of reverse osmosis. This is at a school, and we implemented in partnership with the school and the National Water Grid Authority to demonstrate something that is probably not going to be adopted by farmers, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. But these are large solar systems, and these have a backup power source and are run by 120 solar panels in this instance. So this is your large, could be corporate in a property sense, could be a higher value agricultural industry, but this demonstrates probably the next generation where we've got standalone power and standalone water. And this was implemented at around about $200,000 to $250,000. As I said, it's an upmarket system, but it comes with all the advantages of remote sensing, software, reporting, and troubleshooting. So that's probably the end point of this discussion, but it certainly is the high tech for agriculture. So let's go back and talk about more farm scale reverse osmosis and move on from the drilling. I just would say that the cost of those fractured rock drill holes at supply rates of 50,000 to probably 200,000 litres a day, coming in at around about $30,000 for a successful site. But every second site is not necessarily, it's not a one-to-one relationship. So you've probably got to allow 2 sites to get one successful one at worst case by our drilling. So that's a $30,000 investment for a productive borehole, or a $60,000 depending on your success rate. So let's go to RO, as I said. So at the moment, RO starts at around about $30,000 for the technology that's sitting in front of me in the picture on your right. And the operating costs are sitting in at about $2 a kilolitre for the least cost machines, up to $10 a kilolitre for the highest cost. And I'll tell you why they're high cost. And are coming in around about $4 a kilolitre. The reason why they increase in cost is for issues like ion management, because not all water is the same chemistry, where your replacement for membranes is high, where you've included solar and other costs, and where you've got post-RO treatment, or you've got an increased power cost. So that's what pushes you from the operating costs at the low cost to pushing you up to the high cost. Interesting about the way that we've seen the early adopters work and those 4 RO plants work is that things that are causing increased costs are things like large pre-treatment costs. And that's related to how often you replace membranes. What we were really pleased about, that the input salinity wasn't as significant as we thought it would be in terms of the cost and management. So that was a positive outcome. But the lesson from all of that is small systems running over a long period, if we like, more towards continuous use, is looking better than farmers who have gone in and bought big systems and using them infrequently. So that's one of the early lessons. This early adopter work concludes in May this coming 2025. So at the moment, I'm just giving you some headlines. All right, the perennial question with RO is, what do you do with the rejected water? So the rule of thumb is whatever the groundwater salinity is, the rejected water will be twice that. And the project's goal is to find low salinity water that has the least saline rejection. And it also means that the operating and construction cost of these systems are minimised. So there's half a dozen more ways that salt water is being treated through rejected bores to the left, evaporation basins top, farm salt lakes, and creeks and drains, which would come up with the most regular applications for rejected water. But the interesting model that we're developing some data on is around irrigating this water onto saltbush. And there are some more novel treatment systems. I think the backdrop of salt lakes and salt land in the wheat belt helps us with this implementation, but this is a regulated process, and farmers in the wheat belt seek a process to go through the Soil and Land Conservation Act. And most of the demonstrations that we've gone out to and found have actually done that pre-assessment work to make sure that their systems are compliant. All right, I'm going to wrap up because I've used a bit of time, but I think probably one of the really good outcomes of the project is we've spent a fair bit of time developing apps and assessment tools. So the groundwater and salinity app documents the distribution and salinity of groundwater across the wheat belt. The HydroGuide app is probably more for Nik's work, which is about the distribution of dams and plays into the WaterSmart Dams project. The GeoMap provides all the state's geological data in a simple to find place, and I've got the regulations page sitting there. So in summary, our project was to go and find the next generation of water, the stuff that was going to be hard to win and harder to treat. So we went to try and find water where previously there had been almost no exploration. That's in the fractured system in the top 100 metres. And as I said, our entry project was 1 in 2 success rate, 60% by definition. And that was at finding 50 to 100,000 litres a day plus at a stock quality water. However, not every site was of the water quality that farmers wanted. So we've explored RO treatment at 30 sites, 10 in detail, 4 towns. And as I've given you a quick summary there, water's probably sitting at about $4 a kilolitre. In context, farmers pay out of the grid around about $3 a kilolitre. They pay through Drought about $8 a kilolitre, and they pay in emergency situations, or at least the state pays on their behalf, around about $45 a kilolitre. So I think we're getting close to a solution for the hard to win water. But I'm going to segue into Nik's talk to say that we've got 180,000 dams already sitting in the wheat belt that provide the least cost pathway to good quality water in many instances. So the objective of the WaterSmart projects has been to get them to work as well as possible, and Nik will give you progress in that project. So I'm going to stop sharing. Hopefully I go back to the main screen, and apology for the stuff up in the middle.
Yeah, you're back, Richard. Yeah, that was a fantastic presentation. Thank you very much, Richard. It's always good to touch base with all your research, know a little bit of what reverse osmosis is doing, the new opportunities and the economics as well. So that's a lot of questions behind it. And then again, I want to remind you, if to all that are listening, if you want to put any question, you can put it in the chat on. We can have the Q&A at the end of Nik presentation. So touching base with Nik, sorry. He's going to be our next speaker. Nik, if you can start sharing if you're ready. So he's a scientist who's been advancing in hydrology, geomorphology, and as well in remote sensing. He's focusing in how climate impact any kind of farming system and human activity. And now he's leading the Water Smart Dams project. He will share insights of how to maximize efficiency of dams, some designing tools, how to boost runoff capture and water retention as well. So Nik, please.
Thank you very much. Just double checking you've got my shared opening slide.
You're good.
Yep, super. And hoping that's slide 2 now.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Yes.
Brilliant. So yeah, I'll crack straight on into the detail. On the left here, as Richard's articulated, there is this broader program of work, and it's really about these multiple prongs about how we look for solutions. And this part of the puzzle is, as Richard refers to, making this significant amount of resource that's sitting out there, the 180 odd farm dams that have been mapped across the broader southwest West Australian ag region, work in a future climate. And so that's where this project came out of. And this is a collaboration between ourselves at the university, Richard and his water science team, DPIRD, the Grower Group Alliance and the Southwest WA Drought Hub, and then seeking the advice that we've got through people like yourselves and Glennis, who's online, that informs from a grower perspective what priorities and needs we have, and encourage you to work through the fantastic team you've got there at FACEI to help communicate those to us to understand where your needs at the end are. And then with this project in particular, 4 different grower groups that we worked with, and these were selected a little bit to stratify across geography, and that's by things like access to the grid and groups that are entirely off-grid, different sorts of farming practices, so people who are maybe more out and out large cropping only enterprises, some sort of mixed enterprises, and maybe more mixed with probably a strong livestock component, and also stratify a bit west-west. So with working with Compass Ag Alliance out of Darkin, Madfig from Merredin and areas, Southern Dirt around the Kojonup footprint, and Fitzgerald Biosphere around Jerramunga. So you see here the project is about these absolutely awesome people that we've been lucky enough to partner with through the grower groups, who then host a range of sites and examples of technologies that I'll present a little bit about. But it's really about this partnership. It's about building things at scale of adoption. So this isn't mucking around in laboratories at the university. This is learning from people that are adopting and supporting the Q&A around, or the R&D rather, around working out the numbers behind some of these things. This sort of covers this broader geography and some of these zones within the Southwest WA Drought Hub. So really we think about this from 4 components when we look at what farm water security looks like. So we do have a number of farm dams, but a lot of them were built in a different context. And that was, in the 19-whenevers, 50s, 60s, 70s, something like that. And they were built in the context of go to 1.5 to 2 million litre dams, largely built to supply sheep. We had a lot of sheep running around the landscape that did a very good job compacting the landscape. We didn't have no-till farming practices. Our climate looked a little bit different. And so all of these things combined meant that those things broadly worked for our water infrastructure needs, and they don't so much now. So we need to look at how we get more water into dams and how we keep it there. We increasingly need to talk about fit for purpose water, and so that is the high quality water that you might need for some purpose, but equally, some people who are finding solutions where they're getting fit for human consumption water and dumping it into a dam to supply water for sheep at a very significant cost to their business. So, that can go two ways, and then looking at what the planning side of that equation looks like. So part of the first part of this puzzle, getting more water into dams, there's a couple of different sites and examples here. Some of these looked around these repurposing of PVC tarpaulins that were previously used for grain storage that have then been acquired. So there's a great site here down at the bottom left at Jacob. It's also a community water supply, and this was supported to be developed with Department of Water. In relation with the grower here, we're able to shorten the existing catchment. You can see in the foreground there, he's got a bit of paddock there that used to be a pain for him to be able to access. So there's some advantages in going to a higher performing catchment, which requires less catchment area. And obviously he's returned back into production some area of crop. There's in the top left there an example from the Wandell property, and I'll flag a little bit of really great article that was in Sepler's newsletter that I'd steer people towards, which focuses at that site. And I think we've got John Simons online here, so he can maybe talk to that a bit more. He's been involved with Sepler and running that trial. A trial here with Glennis in terms of retrofitting on Lee Giles's property in North Bandee, this large roaded catchment and dam here, as well as looking at conventional roaded catchments. There's an example on the top right there of a site near Gardner. This one is a really great example. So they had the council come in and need to take a lot of gravel resource, and what that produced for them was a fantastic high-performing roaded catchment. It does a really good job of supplying water. What they had at the end of that was an undersized dam that was constantly overflowing. And so they've expanded the size of that storage to better fit it to the catchment, which is a really important kind of message in this, in making sure that if you've got that sort of resource, you've got a really high-performing catchment to make sure that the dam's appropriate for that size, and also the other way around. And then in this case, where they've added a floating cover that I'll talk a little bit about. There's also other examples we're learning from. Great partnership with the Water Corporation. So there's some examples that they've been able to share around different sorts of surfaces, in this case using HDPE as the catchment type. The advantage of these engineered catchments, if you like, is the quantity of water required to run off. So conventional paddock under no-till these days, you need a 30, maybe 30, more than 30 millimetre rainfall event. And the number of those that we now get are just very limited. So your ability to run water off those conventional pieces of infrastructure is very limited. Roaded catchments that are really well maintained, like that fantastic one on the Joneses property down in Gardner, might run, or that one we know runs in about 7 to 8 millimetres of rainfall. But the TARP catchment at Jacob and the one at Wandell's, they're running between about 0.8 of a millimetre and maybe 1.5 millimetres of rainfall. So what this allows it is where some of our rainfall patterns are shifting, we're getting a lot more of these, lighter, rainfall events. We can capture a huge amount more rainfall. So in this case, over the trial, we've really been able to bump up and target those smaller days of rainfall between those, 1 and 8 mils of rain. In this case, we've, increased by, about 3/4 of a million litres, 3/4 of a megalitre of water into that dam, and also returned an area of that to cropping. Another example is just showcasing and sort of benchmarking some of these different sites. This one's with Compass Ag, looking at runoff from a more conventional setup. And there are some examples out there of people that are also using other different sorts of products. So, for example, some spray polymer technologies that predominantly being used in the mining industry for things like dust suppression, but it does effectively spraying products that look a lot like things like PVC glue that really clop together the sediments and can run water. And we've got some legacy data sets from earlier work that DPIRD did sort of 10 to 15 years ago that are actually quite useful around where we can introduce these engineered catchments to start to run more water. And so there's no one solution for people. You need to think really carefully about what works, costs, availability, materials, and that's part of what comes with that last piece of the puzzle in looking at economics and options there. The next one that we've also trialled has been looking at where we can take a problem of dealing with waterlogging within the paddocks, and predominantly we're working higher in the landscape. We're targeting areas that don't have obvious area of salinity, and that's building these different structures. In this case, we've got one down near sort of Darken Way, and the south here have put in these large VJ structures that are kind of working a bit as a hybrid interceptor type bank and taking water out of the sort of through flow through the catchment there. In this case, it's producing, reasonable amounts of quantities of water. In this winter, they've had, close to a megalitre of runoff. And what's really notable about this is how fresh that water is. So in this case, this water has been, almost imperceptible to humans in terms of taste. My tap water here in Perth, by reference, is about maybe 350 milligrams per litre. So this is better than my tap water for salinity, and it's taking a problem and turning it into a resource. The caution, I guess, I've got a little animation there of the water running through the flume structure that we use to monitor these interventions. Here's another example down near Kojonup, Scotts Brook kind of area. So this year's only had this intervention working, been a bit of a dry year, bit of a challenging year. So there has been some good flows, and again, no evidence of kind of salt effervescence at the surface in terms of salinity, but really good amounts of fresh water being generated. What this does tell us, though, is a really important question, and that is, as a resource in a really dry year, obviously you're not going to have a waterlogging problem, and you're not going to have what's effectively your catchment area really functioning and working. So they are a really good solution. They will allow you to enter into a drier phase with a lot more residual water supply on standby. And we've seen some examples of people putting in these tile drainage solutions and then throwing the water down gullies and things to just get rid of it, which kind of blows my mind a bit. So I think this is a really important message, and we've been able to get some really good benchmarking data to show that these are really quite fresh. In this case, another example near Kojonup, just north of Kojonup, and they've had in the order of about 1.5 million litres of water flow out of that drain over the course of a couple of seasons. Again, this is pretty fresh water. This one's a little bit saltier. This example. Next sort of piece of the puzzle has been working to do some benchmarking work with some properties around leakage, and just trying to really get people to understand how much water is disappearing out of those dams. So we can see here that the dam's losing in the order of about 1.2 to 1.3 metres worth of water to evaporation, but then that variability also in that leakage component. So in these cases, a couple of the sites that we've been working with and doing some benchmarking, there's an additional maybe 30 to 60 centimetres of leakage. So we're talking again about 1.5 to 2 metres worth of loss from conventional dams. A lot of that's to evaporation, and so there's components of that we can start to think about how we target. There's also another piece of the puzzle down the bottom there. We've got some trials going in with Compass Ag, and that's only very recently been put out. So they're trialling a range of products that they've added to the dams to try and reduce leakage. We're actually, part of our team's going out, I think next week or the week after, to download the data loggers that we've got and start working on the data analysis for that. We're very interested to see the results of that, and allows us to, again, do these pieces of R&D where we test the products, letting the people who are on the tools, who are interested in them, try them, and then support that through the R&D. The other component has been looking at things like what Watercorp have been doing. Got actually Richard George's foot in that photo with the hexa cover. These are what we call a tessellated hexagonal cover. So these little floating discs go together. That was a trial that the Water Corp ran at Wellstead. And what was notable here, I guess, was, the headline figure for evaporation reduction was about 75%. So that's quite a significant amount of water. But we would note that the manufacturer says that they perform at one particular level, and the reality of that is somewhat different. So again, it's a really useful reminder to say, some of those headline manufacturer figures do not represent actual performance. This particular product, I don't think, is of significant use in the broader agricultural industry just because of the price point, because you are paying in the order of sort of $50 to $60 per square metre to treat these areas. We do have some examples of some of those sites. There's one down near Scotts Brook, Bridgetowny kind of way. And these are what are effectively like swimming pool covers. The price point of them is about that $12 to $15 a square metre. And we're currently working on benchmarking what the actual evaporation losses from those are. And we're hoping that we'll have some figures very early in the new year as part of the ongoing project communications that we'll be able to push out from those. There are also, it's really worth noting, things that we know that broadly work. So there's some really good work that was done by the Agriculture Department, DPIRD, some time ago. But, there is evidence to say a 20 to 30% reduction by things like vegetated dams. This is a great example near Kojonup. You can see our little floating pontoon where we're again doing some benchmarking work. A lot of commentary around, don't put your trees near the dams, cracking the dams. This dam probably has the lowest leakage rate of any dam that we're monitoring on the project. Has a lot of melaleuca around it, and you can see how beautifully still that surface of the dam is because of that effect the vegetation has. In this case, it's a really high reliable water resource. It's really super fresh. The melaleuca really, seems to hold a lot of water in there, and it's a high quality resource. And the farmer and his family are able to get a very good feed of yabbies and what have you out of there. This one I just wanted to sort of flag. I, only saw this on X, Twitter, a couple of days ago. Really great article from SEPWA. They're based around the Esperance area. I thought this, version of the Wandell's property, which was one of the sites that are hosting one of these trials that SEPWA and DPIRD are supporting to run on where they've taken a part of their roaded catchment and replaced it with one of these tarpaulin catchments. But I think this really talks to the sort of thinking about what water security looks like. It's not one thing, it's a lot of things. It's getting the fundamentals right. So the dams all have roaded catchments. They're well maintained. They work well. Every last drop is being used off the sheds. There's interconnection across the property. They can move water around. They're thinking about where they're strategically using the water resources and where the best benefits for those, and using tanks to store water and some of those additional benefits of tanks in terms of, avoidance of evaporation, but also letting a lot of the sediments fall out that just doesn't really happen in farm dams. Great example of actually using silt traps in their dams, very significant silt traps in this case, which lose some water, but they also improve the end quality of water. So really good example. I really enjoyed reading through that one. The other part of that is this fit for purpose water discussion and some of the work that we did with the MADFIG and other groups in benchmarking water quality testing across the wheat belt and trying to look at that. And I guess I've actually sharing a version where I had a different slide with some of the results, but unfortunately I've saved the wrong version. But in that, I guess we've been able to test across things like scheme water, bore water, rain tank water, dam water. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. Some of the things would be, pretty obvious and people would be aware of. So, the dam water, does have issues in terms of turbidity. Turbidity has significant challenges, for a range of applications, in particular, say herbicides like glyphosate are very, very sensitive to suspended, clay material in those in that water. But equally, it also flagged really other important things that are also probably of note to people in and around the FACEI group who are maybe using parts of the scheme. And that is that where that water is run through a lot of concrete lined pipes, unsurprisingly, the pH can be quite high. Now, glyphosate in particular is a good example because that's something that needs to be, a slight acid. And so we end up with something that's, moderately alkaline, which we're potentially combining. So really understanding what you're doing with the water, understanding your chemicals, understanding the performance that you need out of your chemical program to drive what you're doing, and really marrying up your water is a really important component and where we're starting to shift some of our attention. To flag some of the work that we're still sort of working on and hopefully and will be coming out very shortly is this water evaluation planning tools. And these are updating some of the tools to provide a range of the options and to allow people to evaluate the costs, benefits and opportunities. You can follow this link here to our project follower list and we will be sharing that and making that available and also starting to run some workshops through the early part of 2025. Just flagging a few other little bits we're also working on some different technologies to use things like satellites and artificial intelligence to look at water supplies. So here's some examples of different types of images that we get from different sorts of satellites at different resolutions. We're also trying to use methods of kind of downscaling, so taking imagery of a particular resolution and making it a bit smaller to analyse water security. And then kind of hot off the press, this is from a fellow who's working with Richard's team in DPIRD and also doing a PhD with us associated with this project. So this is actually work that he shared with me that he'd done this week. So this is a really fantastic piece of work looking at satellite-derived measures of how much water is sitting in farm dams, and that's what you're looking at in the blue plot here. And this is based on about 7,000 farm dams across the Shire of Kojonup that he's using as a benchmark through time. And it really is interesting. I sort of found, in particular, we know that period 18, 19, 20 was really a challenging period, and that cumulative impact, you actually really powerfully see that cumulative departure of mean rainfall. So that's the kind of rainfall deficit in the orange line, and then how our water supplies are tracking. But I guess, there were some really significant challenges around water scarcity last summer. But effectively, at least in this shire and this location, the context of the 24 dry season, the end of last summer, the water supply situations were maybe akin to where we were back in 17 or 18. So it's very useful in terms of understanding that regional drought picture. So it's a really nice piece of work that's been put together there. Equally, some other bits which are starting to emerge in terms of doing some work trying to look at water quality and in particular methane. So one of the things around this is the input of organic matter into farm dams, and that can basically alternate the status of the dam being a source of methane and carbon emissions to the atmosphere, or opportunities to actually improve practice and lock up carbon within dams. And there may be opportunities into the future to use farm dams strategically, for example, to engage in carbon or biodiversity markets or other things. Also some significant benefits we know, for example, from that associated with really reducing things like E. coli. So there's some work suggesting not only do you get that benefit of the carbon, but more importantly, I guess from an animal production point of view, you get much more significant, maybe 10 to 15% gains in weight gain by improving the quality of water. That's really about it from me. If you wanted to find out some more, there is this link on the right-hand side to our link tree, which will take you to that little page on your phone or what have you. You can follow a little bit of our flyer that has some more information on some of these sites and the tech gallery, or follow our followers page. But I'll probably leave it there and throw it open to a bit of QA and back to, Franco and the team.
Thank you very much, Nik. That was really insightful. Right on time. So you have 1 minute left, so that's fantastic. I would like to proceed with a Q&A. So if anyone have any relevant question for our presenters, please feel free just to put on the mic and just go directly for the questions. Other way, because I have nothing on the chat, but so yeah, feel free just to ask any question. This is the right moment.
Hi, Richard. Tina here from Facey Group. I was really impressed when we were at the Drought, the Southwest NRM Day, about the apps that you have available as part of your Water Smart project. Do you know how widely used those apps are? Are they has the uptake been very widespread with them, or is it still quite niche use for those?
Yep. Thanks, Tina. Different questions to different answers to different apps, but the geological one has been really surprising me. We didn't make much of it publicly and really haven't until we finished the drilling program, because we actually didn't know how the geology reflected the answers. So it actually works. It actually works well, as I said, 50% of the time. But you have to acknowledge or understand that history wheat belt drilling is between 5 and 10% success rate. So we're pretty ecstatic at 50 to 60%. The HydroGuide app, which is the one that has all the dams on it, again, that's available, has all the flow paths. But as Nik just showed, the work that our other Nik is doing, that will really come to the fore when we can do regionalisation of that data and produce outputs, which is essentially risk by region. And there's a fair bit of way to do that. And the groundwater and salinity one is been around for a couple of years, different applications, but those apps have clickable links, and you can go on them as a farmer and send me your coordinates. And last summer, I was probably getting 60 to 80 farmers a month sending me coordinates to, is there water here? Questions. That backfired on me, but it was great in terms of use.
Thanks.
All right. If anyone have any other question? All right. Fantastic.
Well, I might just ask a question to
Yeah,
Richard.
sure. Go for it.
Most of the installs you've got using solar power, are there any on the actual solar grid, the power grid there in WA?
Yeah.
And the break, how do they decide what?
Yeah, thanks, Josh. So I would say probably 60 to 70% of our systems are on standard grid power. So those that are on solar are the small ones, the 10 to 20 kilolitres a day units. And that's just the amount of power that the big units use. And the hybrid one that I showed you, which is it's an 18-hour a day version. So we just give it enough extra power to push it through because this is a school with 80 kids in it. It's a residential school. So that just runs water through to the mid-evening so that they can get through just logistically as a school. But putting the water under high flow into tanks and storage so that the systems go to bed at night, they shut down, run their cleaning process, and start up again in the morning is a great model. The problem comes in winter when you've got lots of you don't have the light conditions, but by the same token, it's not when the demand exists. So yeah, from that perspective, solar at 10 to 20 kilolitres a day seems to solve some of the technical issues and the supply issues. But we've also got farmers that want 60 to 80,000 litres a day for spraying. So they go straight onto mains power, just because of the heavy demand. So different businesses, different needs. People that have got abattoirs, piggeries, those sort of things, they want large conventional powered units.
Thank you very much, Richard, for addressing the questions. I want to thank you all First, you both, Rich and Nick, for this beautiful presentation and their concise and clear ideas. As we approach to the end of the webinar, I would like to just send a quick reminder that we have gonna have a third round on the 12th of December at the same time, 3 p.m. We're gonna hold this time two researchers from Murdoch University, with Samantha. She's gonna forgive me if I just mispronounce her last name, Pilogen and Tona Sanchez Palacios, who are going to talk about innovative work, their innovative work in applications to enhance plant nutrition and water retention. So yeah, just be sure to follow us. We're going to have this video recording available in our channel on YouTube. We also gonna share it in other sources. So yeah, please just be sure to follow us. Once again, thank you very much for your questions and your active participation. Have a good evening. See you in December. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, presenters.